And I went to Chilocco Indian School. So I went there for 4 years. I went, I think, in '65 as a freshman, junior, senior. So I spent 4 years there and learning how to. I was put into the academic arena because they had a vocational training where you got at least one semester in different vocational arts, like auto mechanics. Spent maybe a semester there, woodcraft or wood carpentry. We spent a semester there. Metal casting, we spent a semester in electrical building, we built motors. So we had experience in each of those vocations, which is good because I got the experience of, if you want to make a choice, you can go into one of those fields. I mean, with Chilocco, first started out as vocational school. But later on in the years, it became part academic too, preparing people for college. So I ended up in the academic portion because one of the teachers would only choose certain natives that were academically excelling in the classes. So I was one of those chosen. In fact, the class I was in only had about, I think, 12 of us. And we are kind of put in special classes. And one of them was like, we had geometry and calculus and all that, and that's what we would work on. A lot of us kind of excelled in mathematics. A lot of us were in band. I was in a band. I played in orchestra, that kind of stuff. So went there and got to experience a lot of things native-wise. Met other tribes, kids my age, that were from all over the country. Alaska, Florida, Arizona, all over to come together.
You guys make friends with them?
Oh, not all of them, but most of them, yeah. In your class, freshmen, and pretty well we all stayed the same as we moved up to the level, freshman and sophomore and junior, all the same group of people that came back. Because some would go home for the summer and come back in the spring or fall. But yeah, we still see our friends, because we made friends with people. And we fought a lot with other people, but we're still friends. Kids they start fighting and jealous and they get gossip. Then we were friends. Because after the senior year, there was an attempt to abolish schools. And there was a group from the BIA called kind of review the school, Chilocco. And when they went back to D.C., they wrote up a real scathing report of what Chilocco was about. They said there was beatings there, abuse going on, and all this stuff. And it wasn't true. By that time, when I was in boarding school, they pretty well had changed. They got more mild with natives. There wasn't beating all the time. The only thing was when I was there, we couldn't speak our language because of the policy in the school, but we still did. And if we got caught, we were just punished by haircuts. We call white walls, trim their hair. And that was the only punishment that was derived from that activity. Up until before that, my parents went, they probably experienced a little bit more different thing in boarding school. When their parents went, it was more and more harsh discipline. Well, those schools were run by churches, Catholic church especially.
Oh, really?
Wanted to convert the natives to Catholic, all of them, but you know how abusive some of the priests and nuns can be. In fact, there was a lot of abuse, not physically, but sexually going on with the kids, yeah. And from those events, schools, that's where a lot of alcoholism started out. When the kids were back, they were in pain physically, so they started drinking, medicating. They figured that's where the basis of our medication, addiction, alcoholism came from, those events. And today, when they tried to explain or tell about those events in the schools, from the churches, a lot of people wouldn't believe them. Oh, our priests don't do that, our nuns don't do that. Yeah. Until it came out, it was happening to them. And all of a sudden they started believing because their parents were being molested by priests and all this stuff, and boys and all that. So actually the truth started coming out now. But our people had gone through that. But anyway, by the time I got to Indian school, it was a little bit different. Like I said, it was more mild, wasn't as strict. All these tribes were there, and a lot of our teachers were, our counselors were Native people. And graduated, no, they were running the show.
So the teachers were the Native people?
Some people were.
Okay.
They had Native counselors, Native dorm people, and they were all Native people hired, so that changed things. But anyway, in 69, the year I graduated, I said they were trying to get rid of boarding schools, and there was a treaty that was established, the government would take care of your health, education, welfare, feed you. Well, the boarding schools are built on those reservations, but trees. But it wasn't really the case. The school system were trying to de-Indianize the kids. Actually, they were started by John Pratt, who was a military leader back in the cavalry. And during the Indian Wars, he took all the prisoners that were confiscated in the Indian War down to Florida. For 2 years. A lot of leaders, warriors that were sent there for 2 years from imprisonment. And while he was there, he would kind of try to train them to be native or non-native, take them to churches and stuff and cut their hair. Actually, if you look at pictures now on websites, you'll see their hair is short and they're wearing uniforms. He was trying to change them. And they would comply at that time. Then after their 2 years there, would go back to their reservation, but they would revert back right away to their own culture. And he didn't like that, and so he said, well, I couldn't work with the elders, maybe I'll work with the native kids. That's where that came. So the policy was to get native kids into the schools to kind of de-Indianize them. I think the policy was kill the Indian but save the man. So for some reason, they didn't want our culture existing anymore. So they started getting kids from different reservations. In fact, the first one that was developed was Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. That's where Jim Thorpe came from. The Carlisle Indian School was the first one. So kids were taken from different reservations. I think the first ones were from the Lakota Nation and taken there. And they would stay there. They were taken sometimes at a year, 6 or 7 years old. And sit there and they'd spend the rest of their life till they graduated there. So those kids that were taken in various places at a young age were exposed to the non-native culture, lost the language, lost the culture. So when they got back home, they just didn't fit in anymore.
Yeah.
Couldn't speak with their parents in the native language. Some started learning again, but they were still disconnected.
Yeah.
And one of the things happened from those earlier boarding schools, and those people started medicating too.
Were your parents, did they go to these boarding schools?
Yes, Flandreau Indian School, which still exists today. It's part of South Dakota, right on the border by Minnesota.
So did they learn, or did they forget their language?
No, my dad still spoke his because there was other Crows there, but my mother didn't speak it. She was from White Earth, Minnesota. My dad was from Crow. And that's where they met and fell in love. And I was born like a year after they graduated. And they lived here in Minnesota for a while, but I think my dad got homesick, went back to Crow and took us with him. Like I said, that's where I was raised, but everybody speaks Crow at Crow. It's a first language, a primary language, and English is secondary. But I wasn't exposed to that because in that home we spoke English. My parents were in boarding school and they were taught to speak English, so we weren't raised in Crow. I wasn't raised in Crow, my sisters were. Sisters were, but I wasn't. But where was I going with this? Anyway, back to Crow. I got lost. What was I talking about? Boarding schools.
Yeah, the Crow, your dad spoke Crow.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
But I didn't speak it.
Mm.
I was kind of disconnected.
Yeah.
But I was still Crow. And proud to be from there. They call it the Solika Nation. People of the big, big bird. A lot of people thought they meant the crow, but actually it was the thunderbird. They were talking about people of the big, big bird, thunderbird. But the name Crow stuck, so we're Crows. And we call ourselves Solika. A lot of tribes are taking back their name instead of being called what the rest of the country calls them. Like the Tohono O'odham from Arizona used to be called Papago. And that term was a Mexican term called bean eaters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they didn't like that. So they took back their name Tohono O'odham, which means people of the desert.
Mm.
And Anishinaabe used to be called Chippewa. They kind of took back their name was Anishinaabe, which means the people, the original people. So a lot of tribes are taking back their original names and identify with that.